Okay, so far we've looked at a couple of ways we can change formatting. We've looked at how you can change the color, and I changed color by using this right here. I had this my config with format. It was an RT table configuration definition in which I exploited this formatting option. So with the formatting option, I was able to change the foreground color based on two criteria, less than 15 be equal to blue, greater than 16 equal to red. So far so good. Now remember, that affected the temperature. If I wanted to affect some kind of a color change to timestamp, that's independent. And remember, if you've got 15 columns, that means there are 15 things that you can configure here. So each of these has its own configuration. So that explains what we see in this section here called formatting. That doesn't explain a few other things that we see on here. Let me explain this behavior option now. If you look at behavior option, you'll notice that we have some things listed here: ad hoc trend, current state, hyperlink, and tag list. It parallels exactly what you see here: ad hoc trend, current state, tag list, and hyperlink. It's actually basically, if you were to choose one of these behaviors, then there are some more choices for you. You would go in here to these configuration screens here, so those tabs, and then you would further configure what what you meant by, for example, hyperlink behavior. So let me demonstrate exactly that. Now for this, I'd like to do a demonstration of what we're going to see first, because I just think it's too hard to explain. Let me go ahead and minimize this. So right here we see, well, this is our old friend, the this Northwind database, and right now we are not configuring any type of behavior associated with this this particular web part. If I click on here, I have no web part connections. I have no configurations that define a behavior of what happens when I click. Well, that's something that we can change if we go over here, or excuse me, that's something we can change by setting up these different behaviors. One of the behaviors you can define is that clicking on a row will trigger a hyperlink. Another thing that you can define is clicking on a row will allow RT Web Parts to publish or to broadcast a list of tags. That's actually a lot more complicated. We'll look at that second. Let's look at the hyperlink first. Again, here's the demonstration. See, there's nothing happening right now. I'm not linking to anything. But if I were to go over here and change this so that we're using a configuration in which the behavior has been set to hyperlink, then that's exactly the behavior we're going to get. We're going to get a hyperlink. So I'll go in here to this is my web part definition for that Northwind database, and I'm going to change the configuration to my config with hyperlink. It's one that I created earlier. I'll show you how that's configured in just a second. I'll go ahead and say OK. And what I've done is I've configured it so that when I click on this, it's going to initiate a hyperlink. As you can see, there's a little link icon. It's going to initiate a hyperlink that in fact sends me off to, it's going to be a SharePoint document library specific for that company. So AlfKey company, when I click on that, as you can see, here we are. We've taken off to a document library. Here's the document library for the company called AlfKey, the ALFK document library. And if I were to go to a different one, if I were to go to Anatar here, go ahead and click on there, it's going to go to a different document library. Yeah, here's a different document library. So that was all done not with the connections, that was done through the configuration. So let me demonstrate that configuration now. Here's the configuration called My Config with Hyperlink. For this particular configuration, we have chosen a behavior for one of the columns that is the hyperlink behavior. Yeah. So for customer ID, that's the column, I chose hyperlink as the behavior. Now by choosing hyperlink, you'll notice that it by default brings up this tab in which you can define how that hyperlink works. Okay. In this case, it says basically we're going to link to that user specified URL plus whatever is in this column. So in this case, customer ID. So in fact, if you hadn't noticed before, watch what really happens when I click on this. When I click on ALF key, it simply goes to a URL that is that user supplied component plus the whatever's in that database. And this is a very primitive example. I could obviously, if I had a more sophisticated database, I could have this go to websites or really wherever I wanted it to go. But the point I wanted to make is that's something that I can define in the configuration. So I've defined, what we're using this to supply a new type of behavior for that column. So without you having to write any code, you basically have new functionality that you can add to these RT web parts. Now when we come back, we'll take a look at what it means to go have a behavior called tag list. Oh, and actually before we do that, let me just mention that if you were to choose the behavior of current state, what that indicates is that we would, for that particular column, instead of showing the value, we would show you that current state bar graph that, if you recall, we saw with the RT values web part.